Sneakers and Cleats, the podcast.
He's got Chuck has so many songs running through his head today.
I know. We went from you
Snoop
said that
Dogg.
was Snoop
Yeah.
and Dr. Dre collab.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we went to Hungry Like the Wolves, Hungry Like the Wolf, Duran, and then Fade In, Fade Out by Nothing More.
Well, what sucks is that since I sit right next to you, I'm gonna have those songs stuck in my head now the rest of the day. So,
Yeah.
not just here on the podcast, but over in the sports department. It's all I'm gonna be listening to the rest of the days. The mother D-O-double-G.
Dun,
Down.
dun, dun,
And-
dun, 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 dun,
Anyway,
dun,
welcome to
dun,
the Sneakers and Cleats
dun, dun,
podcast.
dun.
This
Wait,
is-
we may have to pay
I
a
know that one.
we may have to do a copyright thing there. So I better shut up.
Stop humming.
Yes.
Thursday, August 15th, this is episode 125. Remember to download, rate, review, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating. Let's check McGinnick, Matt Roy alongside. We have Spurs schedule hot off the presses. We going to be breaking that down. There's a lot of interesting things on there. 21 nationally televised games. You got the rodeo road trip. You got the Austin games right in the middle of the rodeo road trip. You got Paris games. You got all those things. So we're going to be breaking down all of that for you. Plus, latest from Dallas Cowboys training camp. A couple of key guys walked off the field with injuries today, so we don't really know the status of them. So going to be once again testing the depth question in Cowboys camp. Plus, Major League Baseball thinking of implementing a rule change that would rock the fabric of the game, especially the way it's played today. We'll discuss potential 6-inning minimum for the starting pitchers coming up. But first, before we get to the baseball, I'll ask you a baseball trivia question because you are my baseball guy. Cy Young holds the record for the
He was
most,
pretty good.
For them, yeah. Some are saying
Yeah.
for the
Anything
most,
else you need on side? Yeah.
for the most games started in baseball history. Who is the active leader? He has over 800 games started,
So
and he is the leader.
you were kind enough to give me a heads up on this, but I had no time to even think about how this was going to go. So the two guys that I said earlier are the two guys that I'm sticking with, and I'm sure I'm 100% wrong.
Which are?
Scherzer and Verlander.
I told you earlier. Just think old. Like who are the
Those-
oldest guys?
Those dudes are old.
They are old. They
Yeah.
are old. All right. So those are your
But
two
you never
guesses.
know by the way they throw it.
That's true. It's a good point. I mean, Verlander is what, 41 now? Is he 41, 40?
I don't know.
Something like that. Anyway,
Sounds about right.
it's the Tom Brady of baseball. No one will exceed Nolan Ryan, who is second on this list, by the way. Nolan Ryan, I think, started 783
You said
games.
current though, right?
Yeah, current.
Okay.
Current. I'm just
Okay,
saying.
I
I have
got
the
you.
list right here. Cy Young started 815. Nolan Ryan started 773. So I mean, it's pretty crazy. But all right, let's get to the Spurs. Everyone think about that. Let's get to the Spurs schedule. Luis, if you could throw up the opening few games for us. Yep, that's the right one. So this is how they start out. They start at Dallas on October 24th, which is my birthday. And it's
Happy birthday, Matt.
I think
Pandering.
hey, that's a great
Yes.
that's a great present for me. I mean, I get to watch some, and we have TNL that day, so that's a great start.
Right?
But that's how they start, is at Dallas. Then they are home to Houston, or home against Houston, excuse me, twice. They actually play Houston 3 times in the first 8 games, and then they are host Dallas after that. So a lot of Houston early.
Yeah, right. And don't they play them in the preseason too?
Yeah.
Houston?
And then so they basically play Houston 3 times in the first 8 games, and then they don't play them until like I think March. It's kind of a weird scheduling thing. Their first home game is going to be against Houston on that 26th. Overall, you look at it though, you have 21 games nationally televised if you include NBA TV.
Can we count NBA TV if you can't find it on the dial?
If you can't find it, on
Okay,
the
I know,
dial.
but still, it's still more national games than they had last year.
Correct. They had 19 last year, and some of those ended up getting flexed out because they were a bad team. So they were scheduled 19. That includes NBA TV. This year they have 21. But what we saw last year with how they scheduled those nationally televised games is they were all early.
Right.
They
And I
had
think
like 13 or 14 of them before Christmas.
most of them are all early now this year too, right?
Well, I mean, they have nationally televised games going to March 29th.
But I mean, the converse could be true this year too. Like you could actually be flexed into some games late in the year too,
Correct.
depending on what's going on.
You could, and that's why on a lot of schedules you see open dates later in the schedule, but they're much more spread out this year, which makes me think that the NBA is anticipating the Spurs taking a leap.
I would think so. I mean, I think that's fair to argue too. I mean, you would think, especially with the way they played towards the end of the year, and then it seems like the global brand that is Victor Wembanyama would only serve these networks to have them on more.
Yeah, and he's the gift that keeps on giving, right? Like that's the one X factor with the Spurs season that we really don't know. How good is he going to be? How much better is he going to be when you're thinking about, he was already rookie of the year and came in second defensive player of the year. You saw how good he was in the Olympics, and especially in that last game. How good is he going to be this year? And I think we're going to find out really early on national TV exactly how good he is.
Yeah, and I think there was some pressure on the Spurs to get better too, because you remember last year they were playing on a nationally televised game, and whoever was carrying that game had to break away from the game because the Spurs were getting trounced so bad. And have it on pretty good authority that the league called them and said, look, let's go. I mean, you got to pick this up. And this is not how we want the product to go out over the air.
I believe that was one of the games during their 18-game losing streak which didn't help that 5 games in, they're 3-2, and then they lose the next 18. So it doesn't really help when you have a lot of televised games early and you lose 18 in a row. So, but that makes a lot of sense. Is that this is the next star? This is Anthony Edwards, Luka Doncic, Victor Wembanyama. Those are the next stars of the NBA. I mean, Steph Curry's not on his last leg, but he's going out. LeBron, he's going out. KD, they're going out. You have to have that next generation of star, and Victor is that person, especially on the international stage. Luis, that the Austin graphic that you have queued up, let's play that one. The 2 Austin games this year, I think, are very, very well done. They come in the middle of the rodeo road trip. So rodeo road trip starts, I believe, February 2nd. They have 6 games on the road, then the All-Star break, and then they come out of the All-Star break and they have the 2 Moody Center games. Obviously, the whole thing of them playing in Austin is a whole different conversation, but having those 2 games right then makes a lot of sense to me. You're having basically 8 days off, and then you play a back-to-back in Austin. At least you get some time, in the middle of that arduous month-long stretch of the rodeo road trip to kind of come home, be near your house, be in Texas, and kind of relax.
Yeah, and I mean, you'd have to think on the surface too, you're roughly getting home games in there, right? I mean, you have to think that the preponderance of fans in Austin would be Spurs fans those days too, especially with them being gone. So that's actually, whoever thought that was a good idea, I 100% rubber stamp that.
100%. Like that's just a very smart idea. Like no matter how you feel about them, playing in Austin, it's a very, very intelligent idea to put them right then.
Right. You kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Exactly.
You're playing, quote unquote, time away from your home arena, but yet you're still being served home games.
And something we found out a couple of months ago is that the Spurs will be playing in Paris this year. Those games are going to be on the 23rd and 25th of January. Yeah, there you go. Those games are going to be played on the 23rd, 25th of January. One of them counts as a home game for... Is that my phone? One of them counts as it's like squirrel for me. It's like squirrel. One of them counts as a home game for the Pacers. One of them counts as a home game for the Spurs. I think that they make the most sense, obviously, to have those Paris games. But now that we know exactly when they are, don't know if the Cowboys are going to be going there. I think that's probably a good time to have those 2 games as well.
I think from the San Antonio sports perspective, yeah, it's a little sauce for the goose too. And plus, I mean, like that first game is during the week. So it's pretty cool, and Saturday doesn't mess with Sunday football.
So what's your overall? They have 3 games, basically 3 home games that aren't at home. You know what the argument is going to be? 38 home games. You're taking away from your fans 3 games a year. Do you think that there's any problem with them playing 1 in Paris, 2 in Austin, or?
No, I think it's unbelievable brand building. A chance to further your brand in your marquee players' home country for 2 games, win-win on the global market. And then again, you're spreading your brand past the 2-1-0, but if people want to go have a night in Austin and have a chance to go out and see the Spurs on the same night, and then also build your fan base even bigger when they're right up the road, I just don't see any harm in any of this in terms of, if you have 41 home games a year, are we going to really start smashing this thing into oblivion or pound sand to the point where we're worried about, oh my gosh, 3 home games are going to be somewhere else? I'm certainly not going to lose a wink of sleep over this one.
I think it's very telling that what the NBA thinks of Victor. when you have all of these nationally televised games, you have them going to his home country to play games and choosing them, obviously, to play there with them. I think it's just very telling what they think Victor can be and will be, what the Spurs can be and will be. And why not? Like,
Right.
what, like, I never understood the argument against like the England games when you or the Germany games or anything like that when the NFL does it. I mean, I don't understand why they're going to Brazil, but that's a whole nother issue. Why not expand across the sea and try and get more fans to watch your game? We saw in the Olympics, it's an international game. It is an international game, basketball now, and the players, the talent everywhere is growing by leaps and bounds. Why not try and get them to watch your league?
Well, I mean, just this week, Sportico came out and said that the Cowboys are the first team that's over $10 billion. Look what they do with training camp every year.
Mhm.
And even this year in Southern California, I think there's 6 teams. There's at least 5 out there
The
training.
Raiders are out there.
So this is a chance to, again, back in the early days, the Cowboys brand build by having their radio pumped into Phoenix and all of Arizona. And you're just slowly but surely like spreading your brand, but you're also building a fan base with younger fans who may get exposed to your team out there. And you're talking about, the fans in Dallas are always going to be there. The fans in Texas are always going to be there. But by doing this strategery every year, again, the Spurs aren't the only ones. The NBA, certainly not the only ones that have ever thought of this kind of stuff. It's a proven thing over time that if you expose your players or your team to different areas, you got a chance to help build.
If anybody disagrees out there, just throw us a comment on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, and we'll read those on the air, because I really just don't see an issue with them playing. If it was 5 games, maybe 10% of your home schedule, I'd get a little upset. It's almost 10 games. I mean, it's almost 10%, I guess, because you have 41 games at home, but still, it's like, what's the harm?
Right. I mean, in this day and age too, where everybody's on TV, I mean, if you're a kid living in San Antonio or a kid living in Austin or anywhere, and your parents won't take you to a game or you don't get to go to a game, and you see LeBron on TV every single game, well, or he's on as much or more than anybody, then how can you blame the kid if he turns out to be a LeBron fan or a fan of whoever LeBron is playing for in that particular year? I mean, right? I mean, you've got your own stories about how your teams are all spread out. I know that's been a case with me as well. So again, we live in a day and age where you have to kind of move the product around to try to build your business.
There's also a lot of younger fans now that they aren't fans of teams, they're fans of players. Like, I know I'm a Heat fan because when I was a kid, I rooted for Shaq. Shaq got traded to the Heat. Then I fell in love with Dwayne Wade. I love Dwayne Wade. He's my favorite player of all time. And so now that's why I'm a Heat fan. That's more and more common nowadays. Like, if Victor was to leave the Spurs, and please don't say that I'm saying that he's leaving the Spurs, but if he was to leave the Spurs and go to Minnesota, there's a lot of people that are Spurs fans right now that would go and be Minnesota Timberwolves fans just because of Victor. And that's just how things go now. So I think it's really smart to try and appease as many fans as possible by getting as many games in many different places as possible.
And it creates novelty too. I mean, and I think that's what every business is looking for, right? You want something that's not common so that you can, make a big deal about it or get somebody interested that maybe not is interested, or even, like your team going to Paris. I mean, what's been the buzz around the newsroom? Like, who doesn't want to go to Paris to have to go cover, the Spurs? I mean, it's not just right up the road in Austin, right? I mean, there's a million reasons why this is a good thing.
Besides that, you pointed out to me, they have a really tough stretch at the end of the season. 20 out of 35, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, just, that was the first thing that caught my eye, because usually my eyes are always drawn to the rodeo road trip. That can be a very tough stretch. And,
especially when
the
you're not winning
Spurs,
games.
right, when the Spurs had, Tim and Manu and Dave and Tony, they did a pretty good job of handling that and really team building during that time. And I'm not saying that the Spurs haven't team built during that time now or recently. It's just, it's harder when you haven't won.
Mhm.
And so those teams were able to figure it out, I think, a little quickly because of how good they were and how you make that work to your benefit later in the season. This is still a very tough stretch for them. I think, in the recent years. And now, again, you add 20 of 35. That's
20 of 35 on the road
on the road to end the season. I mean, so you would think on the surface, this team is going to have to get off to a much better start than it did a year ago, if it has designs on at least being a play-in team.
I would argue that it's hard to get off to a worse start.
I think that's fair.
It's pretty impossible, seeing as that they started 3-20. If they start 2-21 this season, I'm not watching a game the rest of the year.
Write that down. No, there's no. I don't think there's no chance of that happening.
To that point, though, they end their season with 5 of 7 games on the road, and it's not cupcakes. It's at Denver, then you're home to Cleveland, at Portland, at Clippers, at Golden State, at Phoenix, and then home to Toronto. Like, there's no cupcakes right there. No. Toronto's going to be a better team. Portland's going to be a little bit better of a team. We don't know what the Clippers are going to be, but Golden State is still Golden State. Phoenix and Denver are 2 of the best teams in the West.
Right, and those are still road games. But let's just hope, for the sake of beyond hope, that those games actually mean something at the end of the year, right? Not other than just trying to win more games than you won last year, like it was this year down the
playing
stretch.
Against Golden State, playing against the Clippers, those could be potential foes when you're battling for a play-in spot. So one of those 7, 8, 9, 10 seeds. So they definitely shaped it up to have drama if the Spurs can do what they think the Spurs can do. So anything else regarding the schedule before we move on to the Cowboys?
Nope. It's hard to get excited for me personally when it feels like we're just in the throes of football season starting. So, again, I just look forward to seeing how it all plays out when it all plays out. When does it start? Late October?
October 24th. Bob?
I guess it'll be here before you know it.
Right.
Crickets in the comment section.
Damn, come on, guys. Hey, what about you? What do you?
It's football season.
What do I think of the schedule?
Yeah. Did you look over it?
It's obvious that the Spurs are moving to Austin, right? Because they're playing in Austin.
Shut up. All right, we're not talking anymore. All right, we're going to move on to the Cowboys. So the Cowboys had another injury, unfortunately, this week to their tackle situation. So they already lost Chuma Edoga, who we talked about on Monday. They also lost Earl Bostic with an ankle injury. Don't know the severity of that one quite yet, but it's another question of what the depth is going to be, especially at that position. They signed Cole Cabral, ASU legend, forks up, from the Michigan Barnstormers. So is that the UFL team? Whatever it is. Showboats?
Michigan Panthers.
Yeah, that one. From the Michigan Panthers.
Wow, I can't believe I was spazzing on that. That's horrible.
That's just not where my brain is right now. I haven't really thought about it yet. But anyway, so they signed Cole Cabral.
Is it the Michigan Panthers? I think I'm tripping on it.
Let's move on now.
Yes, please join the comment section.
Yeah, somebody help us out. Anyway, so they signed Cole Cabral. How concerned should they be with the depth? Because then today we saw Brandon Cooks go down with an apparent upper body injury. You saw Donovan Wilson go down. He's back on the field, but he went down with an injury a little bit during camp today. So how concerned are you with the depth of this team?
Well, it's hard for me to get too excited this part of training camp, but I'll take my cues from the team. And they've already made a trade to get another defensive lineman, and they got the Phillips, the veteran player. And again, sneaky little pickup, a guy with 20 career sacks and, a plugger. And, a guy doesn't have a 10-year career for no reason. So
right.
He's probably going to be, the Texans have done a really good job of picking up that kind of player during the off season. So
6'6", 330 is what he weighs.
So, I think they're starting to get to the point where, there's still some time to pivot out of where they're at to try to build the back end of their roster. And I think with the movement that we've seen the last couple of days, they are starting to get concerned that this at some point, it's not quite where San Francisco is in terms of the injuries, but you want to try to stay ahead of this kind of stuff as much as you can. And, kudos for the Cowboys for being proactive.
That's not something we've associated with them very often. Speaking of not being proactive, Stephen Jones today had a comment on Dak and CD's contracts on their YouTube page. So this is what he said regarding the contract talks ongoing. They're evolving. I know everybody likes them to be done immediately. As I said, it's a challenge for us in terms of working 3 of the better football players in this league, trying to get them in a situation where they're happy about it, works well for us. We'll continue to work. Pencils are up. We're working hard at it. Hopefully, we'll continue to make some progress and get one or two of these guys done. Obviously, those one or two guys would be CD and Dak and not Micah. I look around the league and I see people getting this stuff done. I see offers being made. I see trades being conducted. I see contracts being signed, and it's never by the Dallas Cowboys. And it makes me wonder, okay, why is this so hard for you when it's not hard for everybody else?
Well, they've done an amazing job over the years of trying to figure out how to get their big guys signed. And, again, some of that goes to their detriment too with some of the contracts that they've thrown around. However, this is simply a case of you've already paid Dak. You've already paid DeMarcus Lawrence. You had some other bad contracts that are still probably eating away at your salary cap. So a lot of this simply is they've already spent some of this money, and there is a ceiling called the salary cap. And I would imagine it's really difficult because all of these deals that they've made up to this point, and I don't know that there are many of these deals where even in real time we were going, oh, this is a bad deal, or I wouldn't have done this. There's not a lot of us that were screaming bloody murder when they, gave 13 his contract, even coming off the injury. Although, I know I spitballed that it was, okay, I wouldn't have done it, but I'm glad that he got that the money, because of the type of guy he is. But this kind of contract ultimately does hurt you down the road when you're talking about trying to then sign some other guys that have come due. So it's simply a matter of this is where they are based on their behavior the last 5 to 6 years. And it's tough. I'm going to be curious to see how they ultimately pull this off. And if any of these players relents in terms of the dollars that they're asking for.
I just don't. The Cowboys are up against it again because you have the whole Brandon Ayuk situation that's playing out right now. He's going to make $32 million a year, 31, whatever the offer is right now. I think New England offered him 32, and he didn't want to go to New England. But he's going to get 32, and that means the CD has a very justifiable case to be like, I'm way better than him. Also, BA Forks Up, another ASU alum. Played with Cole Cabral, just saying. If it was me, if I was Steven, and I have no knowledge about what their negotiations are going on, just to preface this. If I was Steven and Jerry Jones, I would say Brandon Ayuk's going to get signed. He's probably going to drive up the price even more. I would have looked at this before and be like, okay, I need to get this done now. What is he asking for? Is it really worth fighting over $1 million, or maybe, I don't know if they're fighting over years, but is it worth fighting over the money at this point when you're just getting raked through the coals?
Sure, but is that trade still on the table? With potential of him playing somewhere else?
The rumor was that that Pittsburgh and the Niners have a deal in place.
So, that ultimately, and I know nobody wants to talk about that, but if nobody budges and we still have Micah and CD and then Dak wanting his second big bag, maybe it's going to be impossible to pay all three of those guys the way they want to get paid. And then at some point, you may have to consider what the 49ers are doing too. And the other side of that is for Ayuk is that there are other really talented players on that offense. How much of what he gets is because your running back is so good, because your tight end is elite. They've got other receivers that can go catch the ball.
Debo, obviously.
So, yes. So, again, that's up for other teams to decide how they're going to, they're going to pair this, or for the player to decide how that's going to all work out. But again, if all three of these guys want their bag, I don't know that the Cowboys are going to be able to do it. There's only so many dollars under the salary cap.
But you can also see how untalented this team is besides CD on offense. Like, he had 180 some odd targets last year. Who are you throwing those to? Jalen Tolbert? Like, he's not at that caliber of player. Brandon Cooks is not that caliber of player. Plus, Brandon Cooks is going to get hurt at some point this season. We know that from his past history. So you're going to be without him.
And he's an older player.
Yeah. Who are you throwing the ball to? Kevontae Turpin at this point? You need CD on this team. I am in favor of not paying receivers because I think that they grow on trees a little bit. If he was going to play this season and you could replace him next season, then that would be what I would do. But at this point, you don't have the resources to replace him because you didn't draft anybody to replace him. You don't have those young guys coming up to replace him. It's not like in Denver, just for example, they traded Jerry Jeudy because they have Marvin Mims and they really like him. That's not the situation you're in. He has you bent over a barrel, just like Dak has you bent over a barrel.
Again, I mean, this is a lot. This conversation's probably a lot broader or bigger than my eyes are able to take in at this point. Because, again, I hate to bring up the Packers. When they got rid of 17, everybody thought that was the end of the world. And then look what happens. You got a bunch of nobodies for the first 7-8 weeks of the season, and now there's an argument who's the number one because they've got so many guys that can go catch the football, as proven through the last half of their season. So
Christian Watson needs to stay healthy, and he'll be the number one.
Dobbs is pretty
That's
darn
true.
elite.
Good
Yeah.
point. It's a good point. All right, let's get to the trivia answer before we get to baseball real quick. So you're sticking with Verlander and Scherzer or Scherzer.
Yeah.
Give me one of them.
Verlander.
All right. So again, the question is: Cy Young holds the record for the most games started in baseball history. Who is the active leader? The active leader is Zach Greinke.
He's still pitching?
He's still pitching.
I didn't realize he was
He's
still
hurt. He's hurt right now.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Do you want to guess how high on this list he is? Like,
he's probably pretty significant.
Like, he's 34th. Isn't that crazy that the active pitcher that with the most starts in Major League history is 34th on this list?
Wow. Well,
Scherzer,
times have changed.
Scherzer is the third highest active player.
Where's
by the way.
Verlander's nowhere near?
Verlander is second. Verlander is 43rd on this list. But the top 10 is all the names you would suspect. It's Cy Young, Nolan Ryan, Don Sutton, Greg Maddux, Phil Niekro, Steve Carlton, Roger Clemens, Tommy John, Gaylord Perry, and Pud Calvin. So,
I'm kicking myself now with Greinke, but I still would have put the other two guys ahead, if I'm being honest.
I mean, Greinke.
Sneaky.
Cranky Greinke.
It was a sneaky question there, Matthew.
Hey, sneaky Matt Roy. That's what I do.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask that because the Major League Baseball is in the very early stages of considering rule changes, just like they did a couple of years ago. This one, on the surface, makes you think it's not a good idea, and then you read a little bit more about it, and it makes a little bit more sense. Essentially, it would include the rule changes would include a minimum 6 innings for pitchers, starting pitchers. There would be 3 exceptions. He throws 100 pitches. He gives up 4 or more earned runs. I think you should make that runs just in general, because just for example, last night, I think the Rockies pitcher threw 50 pitches in the first inning because he had 3 errors in the first inning by his defense. So he ended up throwing 50 and they took him out because of that.
Well done by the Stones defense.
Yeah, exactly.
I could tell. Yeah.
Or he gets injured. And those are the 3 exceptions. And on the surface, when you have so many Tommy John surgeries and so many blown elbows right now, it seems like a bad idea.
I'm with you. On the surface, it sounds like a horrible idea. I mean, I get what baseball's trying to do.
They're trying to bring back the preeminent starting pitcher.
Yeah, it just, again, then the Players Association, I don't know if they have any say anymore on these kinds of things, but that would mean fewer jobs probably for bullpen guys. And, that kind of thing is hard to legislate, it would seem. If you got a guy that you think has arm soreness and, maybe you have him out there for an inning or two, he's just trying to, pitch off the soreness. But then, what does that lead to if a guy is extended into 6 innings because he's pitching pretty well through the soreness? I just don't know that you can measure that, given to what you said, the massive amount of arm injuries that are happening at every single level.
They had a lot of ESPN did this article, and that's kind of where I saw everything today. I think it was Jesse Rogers from ESPN. And he talked to a lot of GMs and whatnot around the league, and they basically said it would cause pitchers to pitch differently. Like, we've seen this maximized velocity throughout the league. You're throwing 100, 103, 104 if you can, and it's really less on location and more on stuff, or less on efficiency and more on how good your fastball is. They were talking about if this was to happen, then you need to get through 6 innings. You can't be throwing 104, 105 miles an hour anymore. But that's a hard genie to put back in a bottle.
I agree.
Because you have the Bernie Little League right now, who is playing in the Little League World Series, and they have kids who are throwing everything they have, every single pitch.
Yeah, there was a young kid from Mexico. I shouldn't say young man, but he sure throws like a man. I mean, kid's throwing high 70s off a mound from 60 feet away. And that equates to darn near right at 100 miles an hour. I mean, it's unbelievable what these kids are doing nowadays.
Exactly. And that's how you would need a ramp up period for this. If they were to institute this, I think they would need like 8 to 9 years to implement it, just because you have to change everyone's mindset in the minor leagues. You have to change everyone's mindset even below that in high school, middle school, little league. You have to change the mindset again for someone who wants to be a pitcher. You're not throwing as hard as you can for as long as you can anymore. You're throwing efficient, kind of more, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. You're trying to throw for longer periods of time and elongate yourself.
Yeah. It's very, very odd too, because you've got the whole minor league thing, and a lot of these organizations try to protect their pitchers while they grow up and become men. And so, when do you teach these guys that they need to go deep into games? I mean, it's just a different era. And I'm with you though. I think your initial premise was right. This sounds like a really bad idea.
I do agree that something needs to be done, because there's really no more exciting thing in the major leagues than, besides a home run ball or something like that, or someone who's hitting 60, 65 home runs, than a dominant starting pitcher. Like, those guys, you just don't see very many of them anymore. But to have someone is going to take the bump every 5th day and throw in 8 innings, a complete game, a no hitter, like, that's just so exciting to me as a baseball fan. I want to see those starting pitchers instead of the openers that we see right now, throwing 1 inning and then giving it to the bullpen. Like, I don't want to see that. I want to see my guy against your guy. I want to see Shohei Ohtani against Tariq Skubal 4 times in a game. And we're just not getting that right now. And it's smart for them to try and bring it back. I just don't know if that's the solution for it.
I'm with you.
All right. Bob, do you have anything to say before we leave?
I miss Gaylord Perry.
I
do too. What a great pitcher he was, and the old spitball thing. And he used to freak batters out all the time. That guy was a character, man.
He really was. And he was here in San Antonio. God, I don't know how many years ago that was. They had a major league alumni thing for the troops. And it was really, really cool. He was there, and really good with kids, and just one of the greatest characters in probably baseball history, right? I mean, the name, who he was, how he went about his business. When you hear Gaylord Perry, it brings a smile to your face.
Speaking of spitballs, did you guys see that the Hawk Tua girl threw out the opening pitch today?
Oh, nice. No, I didn't, but
she did. She threw out the opening pitch.
She threw a Hawk
game.
Tua, huh?
I watched it.
I want to know if she spit on that thing before she threw it. Anyway, I hope they're not
Load them up.
I hope they're not listening up in the newsroom right now. Anyway, that's all we got for today on the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. Remember to download, rate, review, subscribe. Give us a 5-star rating. Tell a friend, tell an enemy. We'll be back on Monday. It'll be just Chuckster and I, because Don is not going to be here on Monday. So we will see you then.